People would write their favors to the convent in Lisieux, and they were receiving hundreds at first, and then even like over 1,000 letters a day.
Yeah.
Like from people who had been touched by St. Thérèse. Where the relics go, Thérèse is. And I think that's one thing that people have often experienced. It's not just like a memory of Thérèse. It's like her person in a unique way is present spiritually, in the presence of her relics. And how much like God's tenderness comes through there. And people that come with all sorts of problems and brokenness and struggles in their family, and they're just, afflicted. How many people are just so afflicted out there, and they go to the relics and they find this peace in the presence of a friend.
Praise be Jesus Christ, and welcome back to another episode of CarmelCast. CarmelCast is a production of the Institute of Carmelite Studies Publications. For more information, you can go to our website at www.icspublications.org. My name is Father Pierre Georgi of Christ the King, and I'm joined this week by Father Michael Joseph of St. Thérèse. And St. Thérèse is here in the United States, and we're focusing this season on different aspects of, just accompanying St. Thérèse as she accompanies us during this year of hope. This Jubilee Year of Hope, but also as she tours around the United States. And in this episode, we really want to just kind of talk about relics a little bit, and maybe a little bit about some of the miracles that have accompanied, certainly her relics visiting different places, but even before she was a saint, some of the miracles that are attributed to her intercession. And so we're kind of talking about that promise, that great, not promise, but the great desire that Thérèse had of bringing about that shower, spending her heaven doing good on earth, and bringing about that shower of roses that she talks about in Manuscript C.
Definitely. Well, and it kind of all goes back there. You have, when she was dying, she had heard the story of St. Aloysius Gonzaga was read in the refectory. And there was a certain moment, I forget where it was, but I think when he was dying, he said, I will basically like help others. It will be kind of like a shower of roses or something like that. And so Thérèse took that and made it her own. And she said, when I die, like a shower of roses will come upon the earth. And her sisters asked later, will you come see us, or will you look down on us after you die? And she says, no, I will come down. And so this promise that she had this sense of her mission. And as her posthumous, or after her death, you could really see that unfold.
Mm-hmm. I've always been a little annoyed by St. Thérèse with her talk of St. Aloysius Gonzaga, because in the last conversation she talks about how she doesn't care for him much in terms of his personality, and I have St. Aloysius here on my
my goodness,
my rosary. So I disagree, Thérèse, with your estimation, and you're wanting to one up a great saint.
I had no idea that this episode would become your chance to...
my way to kind of get back at her.
Yes. It was not my hope. But just to keep that in context, it was the specific thing about his family or something like that. It was St. Aloysius, it said like he was so detached, like even from his family or from his mom or something, right?
Yeah.
And she said, no, like I'm like the saints love their family, and like I love my family even more, in Carmel in that sense. So I think that was where she was coming from.
And we know that the saints of the Renaissance are subject to all sorts of misinterpretations and the imagination of later biographers, certainly. Yes. And so I think there's some of that we can talk about even with Thérèse, because I think Thérèse has this. There's a sense of people's impression of her that may be superficial, or we put her on a pedestal, and oftentimes in churches she's on pedestals, and we have like a saccharine sort of understanding of her, and these stories are often associated with these roses, these rose stories, and these are good things, but for every person it like attracts, it like turns three people away in some case with anything that's like that specific. And so I think one thing that we can maybe do in this episode is shed some light on some of the stories that are really kind of break through some of that saccharine superficiality with respect to some of the great miracles that, she is a great saint. Yes. She's not the Hello Kitty saint. She's not the Minnie Mouse saint. She's a great saint.
Yes, exactly. And we don't want to get turned off by the thing. Also, even her popularity. I think people, because she's so popular, she's so well known, everyone invokes her. that people almost have this sense that then it's not for me, but there's so much more to her than just those aspects. But those aspects help still, and obviously God used her popularity and just the way that she did appeal to so many people, even those who maybe didn't have the deepest faith, but as an invitation in, and it was always kind of for the sake of the little way. I mean, you see it time and again, the people that she intervenes in their life, or there's some kind of miracle of healing, they always draw closer, to her path and her teaching, right?
Yeah. And in all of these, even when we'll get to the World War I soldier stories, is like, probably the fact that she was a cute French nun didn't hurt.
Yes, I know, right? You see that God used her, like exactly. Even those gifts, like her attractiveness, like her youthfulness,
Right.
like that was all part of God's providence. That who knew that 15 years later it was going to be the most awful war that the world had ever seen, and that she would be this unique light,
In the
helping
midst of
people.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of previews for what's to come,
Sure.
but maybe we should start where we wanted to begin with. I think. Well, I mean, you go ahead with. I mean, how you wanted to proceed.
Sure. Well, I think maybe just looking at the history of her relics and like the power of them. So we know that when she did finally pass away, it's really neat. The first, you could say, purported miracle or healing that happened was one of the sisters who was actually the most against her, probably in the convent, Sister St. Vincent de Paul, she came from a kind of rough background. She saw Thérèse as one of like the kind of bourgeoisie sisters who was favored, and she was just like a hardworking, almost kind of more peasant background. And
Here comes another Martin.
yes, one of these sisters who can do art but can't do the manual work we need, and so she had some serious problems with it. And at the end of her life, actually, she said, I don't know why everyone talks about Saint Thérèse or Sister Thérèse like she's something special. She's really not even that good of a nun. And Thérèse heard this. Thérèse had matured so much, and she said, "Wow, what a grace that I can hear at my moment of my death that I'm not even a good nun." That's how she embraced her own littleness. But after her death, Sister Saint Vincent de Paul kneeled down at her body and asked Thérèse forgiveness and put her head on her feet. And St. Vincent de Paul, she had this problem with her mind, or this anemia of the brain, she called it, where she couldn't really think straight, and she was in this mental fog for years, and it just went away.
Wow.
In that moment, and all of a sudden when it happened, she knew, and she was convinced St. Thérèse was a saint. And so it's just beautiful how the first miracle really with her body was
right there. Probably hours after she had passed away.
Yep.
And it's such a clear one too. It was such a personal one too.
Yes.
Right. In terms of, not only that kind of animosity that might have been there, the tension that was there within the community or with her in particular, but also the clarity with which it would have been for her to see something that she had struggled with for years just disappear in a moment, in an instant.
Exactly. And how Thérèse had such tenderness. She loved the sisters who were difficult to her, and it just shows even after her death that she that's her path, to love those who don't always make us feel great. And then later, so after she was buried, it's actually in a way providential that the anti-clerical laws of the early, late 19th century made it so you couldn't inter nuns in your convent anymore. And it was for the sake of hygiene and stuff, but it was also, there was some anti-clerical elements to that, anti-Catholic elements. So because of that, Thérèse and other sisters of that time were buried in the municipal cemetery in Lisieux. And so once her book had come out a year after, people started coming to her grave and visiting her, and that's where all these purported healings started taking place. And it was so thank God she was in a public place like that.
Yeah.
And she had this little cross that we still have today, and people would write stuff intercessions on that cross. And one of the neat ones is when her body was exhumed in 1911, I believe, when the process was first opened for her canonization, because they have to check the body, there was this huge scent of flowers. I mean, it shouldn't have been there, considering the conditions she was in, that went through the whole crowd. And there was a little girl that had come, and I believe she was blind, and right then she was healed. Her vision was healed.
Wow.
So right when they opened her grave. So those kind of things just already kind of help people kind of see that connection with healing, miracles, the body of St. Therese.
I think, we live today in an age of incredulity in so much. We hear these stories and we doubt, or we're incredulous about, aspects of these things, just as a sort of a general spirit of our culture. So we live in this time where people just don't, they have to see for themselves, and any sort of secondhand account is immediately just sort of discounted as something that, well, they probably were seeing things, or they're probably something about them that, predisposed them to be, tricked in some way.
Hmm.
And I think when we see the amount of instances of these things happening around Saint Therese and shortly after her death, and then certainly during World War I, it's just sort of like an overflowing amount of evidence.
Yes.
It's like this isn't coincidental, and oftentimes two people experiencing the same thing in one place, and being able to corroborate,
Exactly.
one another's miracles and things like
Yep.
that. And, certainly at a time where this was not, this didn't gain you any favor or get you any sort of people to look kindly on you.
No.
In that time, you would have been probably laughed at and.
Yeah, as a fanatic or superstitious or.
Right. So there's nothing, it's, I think to take all of these stories with that, kind of putting aside that kind of the incredulity of our own time.
Yes.
And seeing that God works in these ways.
Yes.
And particularly her message of confidence ought to instill in us that ability to read these stories and hear about them and just praise God.
Exactly.
Praise God for his goodness and mercy.
Exactly. And that she was like this unique instrument of his tenderness, his reality in a very, like you said, like a very rationalistic age at that time, especially in France at that time in the 19th, early 20th century. And the people often who were the recipients of these favors or miracles weren't always the most religious. It was people maybe whose like mom or wife kind of forced them or made them swear to wear a little picture of Therese under their soldier's uniform in World War I or something. Yeah. But they weren't necessarily that devout, but then they learned to like just say a quick prayer or something. And those were the people that she often appeared to and protected in ways when they didn't expect it. And then always, almost afterwards, they became great devotees and fervent Christians because of what she did.
And like you said, some of them weren't even practicing Catholics. Some of them weren't even, I mean, you hear there's a stereotypical phrase of there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole, right? And in that sense, we are disposed in moments of great disaster and danger of being disposed to grace in a special way. And I think Therese was able to cooperate with God in those people's lives in those moments.
Yeah, it may be worth just going right into World War I.
Okay, we've been hinting at it for a while. So.
Yeah, because it's one of the more beautiful moments, and again, seeing God's providence in sending her, and the way too. Thank God for her sisters in Lisieux, because the autobiography got so popular, but they published these little like cheap versions of it. It was like an abridged version that they just like printed like mass quantities and getting them out to the soldiers on both lines, in the German and the French. And then little holy cards, little images, the little relics of like the soil underneath her coffin when it was first exhumed, getting all those things out so that to parishes and other things so that the soldiers would have access to them. And then it created this awareness of.
And to remember too that there were religious and priests fighting.
Yes,
sometimes we forget that. But in France, in World War I, every man was drafted.
Yep.
And so there would have been friars, there would have been priests fighting.
Tons of seminarians,
all in these regiments.
Mm-hmm. And they did, and like they distributed things amongst all the other soldiers, and again, it was just such a hellish time. I mean, no one was ready for that kind of warfare, we know, and just like the misery it caused of just lack of hygiene, the fear, the brutality of it.
And I think that may have something to do with her popularity. I mean, imagine those sort of conditions, that kind of a war of attrition, like just hopelessness all over the place, and this young French girl with a message about confidence and love and boldness and is just kind of exactly what was needed.
Yes,
it was exactly what it would have attracted a lot of people, particularly because of the conditions that they were living in.
Yes, totally. And it's like, again, God, just like his tender mercy that reaches down to us when we're like in our most miserable state, and with something so pure and so beautiful, like little Thérèse, like this sister who just appeared at times and would intervene in these such unique ways. And I don't know, maybe we could just share a couple stories. I know you mentioned that book.
Yeah, so a lot of these stories were collected, these letters, most of them are letters to the Carmel of Lisieux, or letters that were forwarded on to the Carmel of Lisieux, just reporting various things that happened on the front. They were collected and published in French, and then an English translation has appeared recently within the last 3 or 4 years called Stronger Than Steel. It's published by Angelico Press. However, we're going to be selling it on our website, so we'll include a link down below in this episode, so you can have easy access to that. But Stronger Than Steel is the name of the book, and it's just letter after letter.
Yep.
Of different from not just French. I think there's some Irish soldiers too. German.
Yeah.
I missed the German one, so.
Yeah, it was really neat because there was one story in particular where maybe this was, I don't want to mess this up. It might have been World War II, but a French soldier who was healed by Thérèse in a certain way, he spared all these German POWs that they told him to shoot, you know, and he didn't for her sake, you know, and that was a big thing amongst the Germans too, you know, and so that's just one example, but definitely it did go out to the German side too, and there were a lot of Catholics, you know, on both sides, and there's a couple, I guess, more striking ones because you mentioned they would write letters. That was one of the things. People would write their favors to the convent in Lisieux, and they were receiving hundreds at first, and then even like over 1,000 letters a day.
Yeah.
Like from people who had been touched by Saint Thérèse. And I mean, they couldn't keep up with it. It's incredible the way that they were able to process all that. But yeah, so this whole book is just those letters that people wrote into the convent of Lisieux to say, this is what Thérèse did. One guy, Paul Dugast.
This is my favorite one.
Oh yeah, please, you should share it then, because it's so colorful.
So Paul Dugast was in an artillery regiment, and they were moving the cannons, the batteries, and it was muddy, and he slipped and fell underneath the path of the cannon that was being rolled. And I think it weighed like 4,000 pounds or something crazy. Like there's a 7mm like artillery cannon. It's huge. And he's underneath the cannon. They're rolling it forward, and everyone comes running because they think that he's been crushed. And he gets right up. He gets right, and with not any injury at all. And so after this, that regiment, he penciled in on it with a white chalk onto the artillery battery, Sister Thérèse.
Yes.
And so that was their favorite cannon after that was the Thérèse cannon. So it's just a beautiful story, but kind of funny too that this saint, the little flower, right, is their favorite. They named their favorite cannon after the little flower.
And he had invoked her, right? I forget what he had invoked her when he was crushed. I mean, because he thought he was dead, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when they saw that he was okay. I don't know if you'd mentioned that they had invoked her.
Well, right, yeah, he was already carrying her photo.
That's right.
And all of these things. So, but he, right after it happened, was when he reported that he wrote with white chalk onto the battery, Sister Thérèse.
Yes.
And then he would reapply it every time it rained.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Another one was this guy Pierre Albert, who was in a certain spot, and he had gotten an explosion had happened nearby, and he'd gotten like covered with dirt, and he was somewhat buried, and this voice said, "Get up, you gotta go, you gotta get up." And he had invoked Sister Thérèse too. He had, again, his wife had made him pin a little picture and pray to her. So this voice said, "You got to get up. You got to get up." And he couldn't. He was kind of stuck, and he was so tired and so shell shocked. And then she was like, "You got to get up." And then his hand came down and just pulled him up from being buried in the ground of this young woman and put him, where a few yards away. And then that spot where he was just decimated, and many people died, right there. So again, and he knew, it's like, you just can't explain something like that.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk more about these kind of like where she appeared, because I think those are the fascinating ones in many ways. But the ones that I kind of like the most, more than the kind of the apparitions or however you want to say them, but just the stories of the soldier, the letters to the monastery about, hey, I keep running out of pictures. Can you send more? All my friends want a picture of Sister Therese.
Yes.
And so you can see how this would just spread like wildfire.
Yes.
Just these stories, these accounts of people seeing Therese or hearing her voice, or miracles about they should have been dead or crushed, you know.
Yes.
And yet, so of course people are like, oh, you said this is because this Therese.
Yes.
And then you even see letters of soldiers that don't quite understand what's going on with Therese, because you have letters of being sent to the monastery, like to Therese.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's some soldiers were like, oh, there's this holy nun in Lisieux who's praying for people and receiving miracles.
Yes.
And so you get these letters of, sister,
Dear Sister Therese.
Dear Sister Therese, please protect me and my comrades. We're part of this regiment, and we're dealing with all these conditions. And so you even have some of this like misunderstanding, but it's spreading so much devotion and just trust and confidence.
Definitely.
In the midst of those difficult situations.
Well, and she's so disarming, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like this image of this young woman, like no one can be against her. You could be very anti-Catholic, and maybe you could think, it's not, but it's like there's something about her that's like you can't really be against when you really know what she's about. And there's that love, because she just exudes that pure love. And those little images or the little copies of the book, I think just help people kind of feel loved. They had a friend. That's another experience, like a sisterly presence, this friendly presence in the midst of such hardship.
Yeah. Many of them talk about her as little Sister Therese.
Yes.
So even then, she's getting this reputation of like the little flower and the little sister.
Exactly. Yeah, she could be that. Like who's against their little sister? And the whole, and again, she wasn't even canonized yet or beatified. Like her process had just been open. So it's pretty remarkable that she could have that. Another guy, his foot was so painful. And again, it just shows like the details. Like he wasn't dying, but his foot was in so much, about like trench foot and these terrible conditions these guys would get in. And he could barely walk, and they had to walk for like miles that day. And he could barely walk. He was in so much pain. And he just cried out to Therese, and he took this little image that he had, and he just put it against his foot, and instantaneously, his foot was fine. It was no longer bleeding, cracked, nasty. It was just like perfectly restored.
Yeah. One of the ones that stands out to me was the I think that there was a group of men who were trapped in a particular situation where they were kind of being shelled at, shells falling on their location, all these things happening. And they couldn't even, there was so much smoke and debris, they couldn't even see outside. And a sudden peace comes over this one man, and he looks out and he sees Therese, and he reports that he shouted, "Therese is here for us. She's come for us." And all that whole group that was, probably close to death in terms of where they were and what they were suffering and the onslaught of the enemies, and they all survived that incident. Yeah. So I mean, in the instances of her voice telling them to cross, times when they had to bring messages across areas that were mined, and she just telling them which way to go and things like this. So if you're in that situation and you're on a suicide mission, basically, you understand, and you hear a voice of a girl telling you to don't step there.
Yes.
I think that's going to have a profound impact on you
Yep.
in terms of, and then when you survive that whole instance. So I think that these again, this sort of that spirit of incredulity with which we can hear some of these stories and think, how can this be possible?
Yep.
And yet this was at a time of great desperation. And a great need for her message and confidence for these men.
Yep, exactly. And the connection to the relics too. One of the things that Mother Agnes and the Sisters of Lisieux did was take soil from underneath her body when it was first exhumed. That had her body had decayed pretty rapidly because of the tuberculosis. There wasn't much there in terms. Some of her skeleton basically was there, but it wasn't like incorrupt by any means. So. So the soil underneath the decaying kind of casket was taken up and put into little satchels, like little paper satchels, and distributed. I mean, hundreds of thousands of these things. I have a couple. I've seen them other places, so they go way back. And so soldiers had this like kind of relic, of Therese with them, and they would use that a lot. And then after that too, you could see when the people would come to her grave, or when it was finally the body was brought to Lisieux after her beatification, that became just the focal point for so many miracles and so many stories of healing. Often it was people who would make pilgrimage to.
Sometimes the soldiers after the war too. There was a lot of instances of in Thanksgiving coming back
Yes.
to see her and to see, especially when they were she was being beatified and they were building a shrine to her and these sort of things were happening.
Exactly. And they'd become big benefactors for Lisieux or for the basilica that was being built. You see all these ex voto offerings, these little things that people would send in that were, memorials of the healing received, or things donated, like the tabernacle in the church, or like the key to the tabernacle, jeweled key that this one soldier donated. He sold his favorite cow, to donate this tabernacle key. Like beautiful things, humble people, but they want to show their thanks, and so a lot of Lisieux was built up from that.
Yeah, because people don't. I've never been, but you've been to Lisieux, and it's a lot of it is Thérèse.
Yep.
That's kind of the central focus. But I mean, it was Normandy, middle of nowhere, kind of backwater France, up until kind of the 1920s when she was beatified and the basilica was being built, and so a lot of that. I think we can forget some of that. This was like, a town on the edge of civilization, practically.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it became this. I think it's the second most popular place of pilgrimage after Lourdes. So yeah. So and Lourdes too is like that kind of. It's out of the way place and
right.
Yeah. So the train, the train stations they built new stations or different stops so people could get there easier. And you just had this history. One of the great stories is Edith Piaf, who.
Oh yeah.
Right.
She has that famous song. Anytime you ever see you need a French singer in a movie, they play that.
Yes, you're right. The Inception and other yes. But and she was like the Frank Sinatra of 20th century France, like mid 20th century France, and so everyone knew Edith Piaf. And she had a pretty complicated life, but she was born. Her mom abandoned her right after she was born. Her dad worked for like the circus or something, and gave her to his grandmother or to his mother, who was actually who oversaw a brothel. So she ran a house of prostitution, and little Edith was being raised in this environment. But the prostitutes like really took to her like a mom, and they kind of took care of her and helped her. And she had this terrible eye problem, and part of it was because of the neglect that she had received as a baby. And so all the prostitutes and the mom, they closed the brothel for like 2 days, and they took a pilgrimage to Lisieux, and brought her up into the church, and prayed this novena, for her healing. And little Edith Piaf, when she was, I think, about 5 or 6 years old, she was healed of her eye problems.
Wow.
And after that, she became a lifelong devotee of Thérèse. Always had a medal. Always prayed to her before she went on out in concerts and stuff. Yeah. Would always bring her like her various boyfriends to Lisieux, and try to get them on board. But she had this great friend. There's whole books written in French, about the friendship between Edith Piaf and Saint Thérèse. Yeah. But those kind of things, where people would come to her relics, and so then you fast forward to around World War II. Where Lisieux is bombed out. I mean, it's terrible what happened in Lisieux and a lot of Normandy. And no one could get to Lisieux to come to pray to Saint Thérèse. And it was just they couldn't accept pilgrims, Mm-hmm. And so they sent for the first time the relics, so the remains of Saint Thérèse, at least a good portion of them, to the cathedral in Paris, so people could visit her still and make pilgrimage to her grave. And that was like this first almost experiment with, can we bring the relics, out, so people don't have to come here, basically.
Right.
And it really fulfilled, I guess, too, Therese's desire to be a missionary, right? I want to go throughout the whole world and bring the gospel. Mm-hmm. And it became the first instance of her relics going out to start encountering people where they were at.
The relics came here to D.C. in '99, and they were actually here in this house where we're recording. Ah. And of course, I was, I think, 11 at the time, so I wasn't aware of anything going on down here. But the brothers here, tell these stories about what was, they didn't expect if they'd expected the amount of people that were come, they probably would have said, well, maybe we do this at the National Shrine a mile up the road, which is what we're doing this year. When they're coming to DC, they're going to be at the National Shrine. But they weren't expecting the turnout that came. People were parking on the lawn. People were, just finding any place they could. The crowds that just completely overwhelmed all expectation of what they thought would be coming. And they still, it still comes up in regular conversation, even outside of the context of the Relics coming again to DC this year, of just that, the great memories of, people trying to direct traffic, people trying to, direct people to where things were going on, just the crowds that were filling up our tiny little chapel here. And
didn't they keep it open all night too?
Kept it open all night. And
it's not easy to make a friar stay up all night.
And in the 90s, we weren't in a good neighborhood. Things are better now, but
yes.
in the 90s, in the late 90s, this was not a great place to be leaving doors open at night. Just put it that way. We have bars on some of our windows, in fact. But just to say that just the turnout was just incredible. And so she's only been one place so far as we're recording this. So I don't know. I haven't heard any reports. In fact, as we're recording this, she's on a flight from Detroit to Los Angeles. So,
that's right.
So I think DHL is bringing her around. I don't know if they brought her, I think, to the United States. Maybe she's on another flight. But in any case, it'll be interesting to hear some of the reports of just the crowds that are coming.
Well, I did hear the Detroit one did go beyond their expectations.
Yeah.
They had it for a week this time. I think they said maybe over 35,000. I don't remember the numbers. I could be totally wrong. But there were more people than they had expected, and they were able just to but they provided for it well, so people could come, and they gave good, they had resources to share with people about Thérèse and her life, and it was at the Shrine of Saint Thérèse there.
Right, yeah, Shrine of Little Flower in Royal Oak. They actually left me a voicemail while I was in California, so I missed it. And they said, can you overnight us? I can't remember the amount, but it was like a couple hundred copies of Story of a Soul. And it was right at a time when the warehouse had an internet outage. And it was just not going to happen in time for the Story of a Soul copies to get over there. But so they were even
yes.
We need copies to give to people,
It's hard to think of these things too. You try to plan, but certain things fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was apparently a great success, and I'm sure it'll continue to do great good in our country over these next weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, and praise God for the benefactors who made this possible.
Yes.
A lot of the flights were donated for the Relics to travel, and people giving up their time to accompany the Relics on planes and cars and driving them. I think she's going to be driven by a friar from San Antonio to Lafayette, Louisiana.
Oh, that's right.
So just the amount of generosity, it's an opportunity for people to be generous as well. And if you want to help with some of what's been going on, there's opportunities to do that at the website for the Relics, at Saint Thérèse USA 2025 web.com website. You can donate to the cause as well.
And just to say, one of the most unique ways that she was transported was when she went to Russia in 2000, I believe. She was taken on dog sled to a parish in Siberia. So she's gone. Yeah, she gets however she needs to get there, she gets there.
Yeah, and she's probably the most well-traveled saint in history in terms of where she's been and where. She's here in the United States now. We had someone in the last episode or one of the early episodes commented about how they were in Argentina last year, or it was either Argentina or Brazil. I can't remember now. But she goes to these places and people encounter her.
Yes.
And I think there's more miracles to come. This hasn't stopped, and we know that. This will be my first time encountering her relics in the way that they're traveling in the kind of pilgrimage reliquary. But it'll be interesting to see what comes of this trip to the United States and some of the stories. People need to share those with the church.
Definitely. And this book we could just give a little promotion.
Sure. Yeah.
It's called "I Would Like to Travel the World." It was about when Thérèse is kind of the story of her relics going out, because they went out in the 40s, but then after that they didn't go out because people would come to Lisieux still. But then in the mid 90s, they began traveling to other places in France, and then it spread to the rest of Europe, the United States, Oceania, Asia, all over. And this book kind of recounts what happened, and it also gives a beautiful kind of spirituality too of the relics, because we don't want to just you just say, okay, here are these relics, it's like, yeah, but why? Like, why is this important? Or like, why are they so helpful? And so maybe you just could share a little bit about like, what is the spirituality of relics that people would want to come to a place to pray at the presence of relics?
So I mean, our humanity is wrapped up in a corporality, and even with the soul separation from the body in death, there is a separation there. But it's with any sacramental. Like I wear a habit because it's a reminder. It's on me. I can touch it. I can hold it. This corporality of holy things is intended by God to strengthen our faith. But I think there's also the intentionality of like the special nature of like a pilgrimage, or this sort of, I'm doing an intentional thing, making intentional sacrifices, in order to make it so that I can go to this holy place, or see this holy person, who's coming, their relics are coming. And that aspect of corporality is just a part of how our nature is wired with respect to, the grace builds upon nature, and so we need to be doing the intentional things. We need to be going to church, right? We don't. It's not just about watching mass on TV, unless we're unable to go, but and dispensed. But in the sense of there's real grace that comes from that intentionality, that corporality of the nature of the thing.
Yes. I mean, just the whole principle of the incarnation,
Right.
too, how God loves to encounter us in our humanity and in our littleness too. I mean, there's when the relics were going around, I think it was in Holland. Which was such a secular place, and the faith had really gone down in the decades, following the 1960s. And when the relics came in the late 90s, people were like, this is not going to do well. And they were amazed, like, how many people came out to see these relics. And the newspaper said, like, there's a few bones of a dead girl brings more people than, like, Nirvana or, one of these groups at the time, Pearl Jam or something. It's like, it's incredible, like the humility of just like a few bones, really, that from this unknown girl in France, northern France.
Yeah, you can listen to your favorite artist on your headphones, but it doesn't mean that people don't go in droves to see these tours, right?
Yes.
There's something, I think we can all identify that as there's something there, right? There's something that's a part of our humanity that sees this intentionality, that sees this, I was there, or and there's something that comes from that, and especially in a spiritual way.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to going to a concert.
Yes, which has its benefits, but then, just like this tenderness too. I mean, people where the relics go, Thérèse is, and I think that's one thing that people have often experienced. It's not just like a memory of Thérèse. It's like her person in a unique way is present, spiritually, in the presence of her relics, and how much like God's tenderness comes through there. And people that come with all sorts of problems and brokenness and struggles in their family, and they're just afflicted. How many people are just so afflicted out there. And they go to the relics and they find this peace and the presence of a friend.
I think so. No matter what they're coming with, and that can vary from person to person, but each of them is coming with a disposition of faith, of encountering this person who lived 100 years ago, and yet is still touching lives, and the recognition of how she's touching lives and changing lives. I mean, who doesn't know someone who themselves does not have a story where they experience some grace from Saint Thérèse?
Yes. There's a really nice book called A Shower of Heavenly Roses that was published maybe right after the first visits of the relics, like early 2000s. There's just some beautiful stories. I just want to share one or two.
Sure.
It's okay, because they're very touching. The one, there's a Brazilian woman, and we know Thérèse was really big in Brazil early on. And they actually were the ones that made that reliquary that travels all around. So it came from, I think the Brazilian bishops fundraised for that, like way back in the day. But so there's a Brazilian woman who was married, and her husband left her and abducted her 2 sons and went back to Lebanon and then eventually in Syria. So he was a Muslim man that after the divorce, didn't want his wife having anything to do with the kids. And so he left, and she had no contact. And she would, at a certain point, she finally got to go over there. And the sons were so brainwashed by the father that they thought the mother had abandoned them and all this stuff. They wouldn't talk to her. They were very mean to her. She was so heartbroken. After all these years, she finally sees them and they want nothing to do with her. And just shows how much people, out there are suffering. And so this poor mom is a very faithful Catholic, and she starts doing a novena to Saint Therese. Someone had received a healing or something, and they said, "Why don't you pray a novena for this situation with your sons, and ask for a rose." And so she started asking Therese, doing this novena for the sake of reconciliation with her now grown sons. And on the last day of the novena, one of her sons sent a message to her in condolence. I guess her brother had died, and sent a message of condolence. And this was huge, the first time she had heard from him in years. And she eventually was able to go. He was living in Ireland now. And she was able to go there, and it was like everything was good. He totally was, happy with her, open to her. And they took a picture at this pub, right? And when she got back, she developed the film. And in this random pub in Dublin, in the background, there's a picture of Saint Therese and a rose right next to her, and she even reached out to that pub and said, "Hey, I just want to know about that picture." And they said, "Well, who was that?" And they were like, "Yes, it is Saint Therese, and no, it's not for sale." And so, but it was such a sign, that Therese was with her in this like such a heartbreaking experience, right? And showed her presence and brought about a miraculous reconciliation.
Yeah.
Such as, one of those things. I think maybe just a second one is this lady who had had two miscarriages, and her mom was praying to Therese for her, and doing this novena. And on the last day of the novena, the woman woke up and and she had no idea the mom was doing this, but just the smell of roses just filled the air. And she had so much anxiety because of her two miscarriages, and it just turned to peace. And it was this like conversion almost of her emotional life in that moment of peace. And then very shortly after that, she conceived another child and named her, I think it was Maria Teresa, after Therese. But again, it's like the smell of roses that just came out of nowhere. She had no idea her mom was praying for her, but Therese makes herself known through this kind of sign of roses.
My mom I just remembered a story my mom had. She used to be a hospice administrator when I was in high school, and she worked at a community home for the dying. And she tells a story of oftentimes they would, on certain nights, they wouldn't have nurses, so that she would have to go to be the person there caring for the person. But one of the patients was actively dying, and asked her, "Who's that nun who's here? Who's with you?" And my mom, just without skipping a beat, "Oh, it's Therese. It's Therese is here."
It's amazing.
And so I think the way that she accompanies people in those moments of great need is just still happening. It's still happening, and we can't always see it. We don't always hear every story. But she's a great intercessor. She's kind of, in every church, she's usually across the way from St. Anthony.
Yes.
Right. So the other great kind of the miracle worker, a saint and intercessor, in so many ways in so many people's lives. I think, she has a great message. She has a powerful message, but she has this powerful role that God has granted to her.
Yes.
With respect to this mission of bringing peace and bringing faith into people's lives.
And you see it through where, especially that first travel of the Relics, all through like places like Ireland, places that had been, very hurt by secularism. The church had been. And the people that would come out, they said confession lines were like through the roof, like you couldn't, like there were so many people wanting to go to confession when she came. And these are people who hadn't been in years, decades maybe, who had fallen away from the faith. And you see this, like this constant thing, all the places that she went, this sort of revival of faith. And one of my favorite other little stories of when the Relics were traveling is this girl had brought her friend. The friend actually wanted this girl to go who was a good Catholic, but the friend was not practicing Catholic, and she actually went to make fun of it. She kind of had that kind of type of humor, and she went there to make fun of like this crazy event that was happening, and she felt such warmth and love when she went to the Relics. After she left, she began reading about Saint Therese and ended up becoming a very fervent Catholic, third order Carmelite, all these things. and so it was just, this evangelization, I guess you could say that we need so much. She continues to bring it just through her presence.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I don't know when. I don't know for sure when this episode will go out, but she'll certainly still be in the country, and so just a reminder for all of us to pray for the people who are going to be going to these events, their receptivity, their intentionality.
Yep.
Pray for great turnouts, and pray for people's just ability to receive whatever God is desiring to give to them through Therese's intercession.
Exactly.
And may He be glorified in all of it.
Yep. And you can see, I think, the list of places on, it's like Thérèse Visit 2025. Thérèse Relics
so
Visit
it's
2025.
St. Thérèse, so sttherese2025.com. And we'll put the link down below for that.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see where she is when this episode airs, and see all the places she's been, and certainly begin promoting her to your. And if you experience anything too, please share that with the church at large, and share that with your friends, and how Thérèse has changed your life even outside of the context of the relics. But I think there's so many ways in which we can really cooperate with her great mission.
Yes. And these, originally too, all these stories were written down in like multi-volume called Pluie de Roses, right? Shower of Roses. And I think they went up until the 20s, maybe right until she was canonized, but again, like I think 10 or 12 volumes. And they've taken kind of what they call the most beautiful of those stories, and they've combined them in a book that was just translated into English, I believe.
Yes, yeah, and that's also going to be available on our website for people to check out and see. Also from Angelico Press, who's doing some great work with some of these things that we don't have time to translate. So
yes, definitely.
There's enough of Thérèse for everybody.
Yes, everyone can take their part.
Take their part in producing these things and getting the message out there. And so check those books out as well. Either from our website or Angelico Press, you can find them on wherever books are sold as well. But just want to encourage you to continue be inspired by this great intercessor, this great saint. And we need her intercession. And perhaps there was something going on at the time when she was traveling the world in the 90s and early thousands. There's certainly things going on now that need great prayer and intercession. And so I think that everything comes providentially. Nothing's coincidental.
Yes.
And so she has something to teach us here now in this year.
Yeah, exactly. And all through different faiths too, even when her relics have traveled to like Egypt and places in the Middle East. They went to Iraq before in 2001, I think, or 2000. And Muslims come to venerate her when they went to Asia, and they love her. They see her as a little miracle. They call her like the little daughter of Allah, this miracle worker of Allah. They have this in Asia. You had Hindus and Buddhists coming to in their own way to venerate the relics of this, who they recognize as this great woman, this great spiritual woman. So it's really incredible, how she crosses all sort of divides, and now is the time.
There's not a wall that the machine gun or the battery artillery Saint Thérèse can't break down. You're bringing back to that other story. But
that's a great way to end. Thank you. That was perfect.
Just 70 millimeter, just grace going straight through all those barriers. And that's what she wants to do.
Amen.
Well, good. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode, and please be sure of our prayers for all those who are attending the visit of the relics of Saint Thérèse, and please continue to pray for great miracles to happen through her intercession. Thank you, and God bless you.